The night began like any other in the small oratory of Turin, quiet, worn and humble, carrying the tired breath of 100 restless boys already asleep behind thin wooden doors. Don Bosco had known countless nights like this, nights of prayer, exhaustion, and silent hope. Yet even as he knelt, he sensed something unusual moving in the stillness, as if an unseen hand had brushed the surface of the world. He lifted his head. The room was the same, a simple table, a crucifix, a worn rosary resting beside a stack of letters. But the air no longer obeyed its ordinary nature. It felt dense, like a veil being drawn across a deeper realm, one that he had touched in dreams many times, but never without warning. This time there had been no warning at all. Don Bosco closed his eyes. "Lord, if this is one of your nights, grant me the grace to face what comes." The flame of his lamp trembled, shrinking as if recoiling from something unseen. A faint vibration rippled through the wooden floorboards, too subtle to be sound, too precise to be imagination. Don Bosco had lived with visions since youth. He knew when the invisible approached, and tonight it approached with intention. The boundary was thinning. He rose from prayer and sat on the edge of his narrow bed. Outside, the oratory was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold itself back from the windows, refusing to interrupt whatever was unfolding within these walls. A chill spread through the room. Not the natural cold of winter nights, but a deeper cold, the kind that carries meaning, the kind that signals the presence of something from beyond the simple world of stone and wood. Don Bosco felt it pass behind him like a shadow without form. Yet he did not fear. Fear had never belonged to his encounters with the supernatural. Only responsibility. These dreams had never been for him alone. In the past, he had seen storms swallowing cities, boats adrift in violent seas, beasts roaming through the souls of young people. And in each dream, a message had been waiting, sometimes clear, sometimes veiled in symbols that took years to unravel. But this night, the message felt different. He sensed urgency. He sensed a threat. He sensed something ancient moving toward him. The first sign came as a soft sound, no louder than a fingertip sliding across glass. Don Bosco turned. The crucifix on the wall was trembling ever so slightly, as though touched by a breath from another world. The air in the room darkened, not in color, but in weight. He knew then that sleep would not be rest tonight. It would be passage. He lay down slowly, rosary in hand, not to flee, but to enter deliberately. A deep silence filled the room. Then, like water pulling away from a shore, consciousness receded. The familiar world loosened its grip. Don Bosco felt himself descending, not falling, but being drawn, pulled gently by a force that knew him, a force that had called him many times before. The moment he crossed the threshold, he recognized it. The dream realm. But this time, it came not as a landscape of symbols or distant visions. This time, it came alive immediately. He found himself standing on soil that pulsed faintly beneath his feet, as if breathing. A pale horizon stretched around him, neither night nor day, an unfinished sky waiting to reveal its purpose. And somewhere beyond that dim line, something stirred, heavy and slow, like a massive body shifting beneath the earth. Don Bosco inhaled sharply. He knew this presence, not by sight, but by instinct. It was the presence of danger, of deception, of a force that hunted the souls of the young with ancient cunning, the same force he had battled in confessions, in counseling, in the streets of Turin. But here, in the dream, it took shape. It always took shape. A voice approached, not heard, but felt, deep and solemn, like a guide stepping out of a forgotten scripture. Tonight you will see what threatens them. You will see what coils around this generation and the next. Don Bosco looked out across the trembling earth. Something was rising, something vast, something coiled. And as the ground ahead began to break open with a slow, terrible motion, Don Bosco understood. The dream was not a message. It was a warning, and the warning was alive. The serpent had entered the vision. The battle was about to begin.
The wind arrived long before midnight, quiet, deliberate, and strangely cold for a season that should have been mild. It swept through the narrow alleys of Turin with the stealth of a visitor who did not wish to be seen. The lamps outside the oratory flickered, as if recognizing an intruder. Inside, the air thickened, as though the night itself had stepped into the room and closed the door behind it. Don Bosco felt it before he heard it. He had been walking the dim corridor, checking each room as he often did, ensuring that every boy was asleep in relative peace. It was a ritual of love more than duty, one he carried out even when exhaustion pressed upon him. That night, however, the familiar silence refused to welcome him. It felt tense, stretched thin, stretched wrong. When he reached the end of the hall, he paused. A breath of wind drifted through the wooden boards beneath his feet, not from outside, not from any visible crack or door, but from within the building itself, as though the oratory had exhaled a cold sigh. Don Bosco frowned. Wind did not behave like that. Buildings did not breathe, and yet something had. He placed a hand on the wall. The wood was cold, unnaturally so, like stone left overnight in winter frost. But the night was not cold. The city outside was not cold. The only coldness came from this strange, invisible current that now circled him like a warning. A sensation tightened in his chest, not fear, but recognition. He whispered to himself, "It begins again." For he knew the signs. Every visionary night in his life had been preceded by 3 omens: a wind that did not belong, a silence that carried weight, and a thinning, an invisible weakening between the boundary of the worlds. Tonight, all 3 were present. He returned to his room, closing the door gently behind him. At once, the wind slipped into the chamber through no identifiable opening. It brushed his neck like icy fingertips. The lamp flame flickered sideways, almost horizontal, as if pulled by a force that sought to reveal itself. The room darkened, not from lack of light, but from the presence of something that resisted illumination. Shadows grew thicker, heavier, capable of swallowing the flicker of the flame. Don Bosco shut his eyes briefly. "Lord, if you allow the veil to lift, grant that I may stand firm in whatever I am shown." A faint tremor passed through the floorboards. The second sign. Reality was loosening. He crossed himself, then sat on the edge of his narrow bed, letting his breathing calm. The strange wind circled him once more, this time slower, almost thoughtful. It rustled the pages of a book on his table, lifting the edges as though urging him to read something unseen. Dust motes drifted in spirals, twisting unnaturally despite the stillness of the lamplight. And then it happened. The world around him thinned. It did not vanish. It simply lost its solidity. The wooden beams of the ceiling became faint, as if fading into mist. The crucifix at the foot of his bed began to shimmer, its edges softening. Even his own hands looked pale, slightly transparent, as though the flesh was surrendering to the approach of another realm. He knew this transition well. The space between earth and spirit was opening, slowly, deliberately, like a curtain being parted by careful hands. He lay back onto the bed. Darkness pooled around the edges of the room, not threatening, but expectant, like an audience preparing to watch a play unfold. His eyelids grew heavy, not with sleep, but with a command from beyond. Enter, see, witness. The third sign. He surrendered. The last thing he felt in his physical body was the rosary in his hand. The beads warmed briefly, as though touched by someone not present in the room, and then cooled again. His chest rose, fell, and stilled into the rhythm of one crossing from the realm of the material into the realm of truth. Sleep took hold, but his soul awakened. It lifted gently, like a feather caught in an upward draft. Don Bosco felt no weight, no gravity, no pain. Instead he felt clarity, sharp, luminous, like the world beneath him had grown distant and irrelevant. His senses expanded outward, reaching into a dimension where sound was not heard, but understood, where light was not seen, but felt. He opened his eyes. He was standing, but not in his room. The oratory had dissolved into a plain of dim twilight. The sky overhead was colorless, an expanse of pale shadow that seemed to wait for something to ignite it. The air smelled of earth and ancient stone, even though he stood on nothing that resembled a world he knew. A faint wind whispered past him, the same wind that had entered his room. Only here, in this realm, it was not cold. It was alive. It carried meaning. It carried intention. Don Bosco turned slowly. The horizon was low and flat, stretching into an indistinct gray. Nothing moved, nothing lived, and yet everything seemed to pulse faintly, like a sleeping heart beneath layers of fog. Then he felt it, a presence far away but growing nearer. It moved like a ripple through the ground, like the world itself was reacting to its approach. Don Bosco instinctively took a step back. The presence was not yet visible, but its weight pressed against him, heavy and ancient. He recognized the sensation. It was the same pressure he felt whenever he confronted the spiritual wounds of a young soul, magnified 100-fold. A low hum resonated beneath his feet. The world here was fragile, thin, not fully formed. It trembled at the arrival of whatever approached. The boundary between this dream realm and the earthly world had not only thinned, it had been breached. A voice drifted through the dimness, not spoken, but carried on the wind. "Do not fear, Giovanni. What comes must be seen." He felt no malice in the voice, only solemn purpose. The presence drew nearer. The ground began to darken ahead of him, forming a long shape, slow, deliberate, coiling. The air stirred with a vibration that echoed deep into his chest. Don Bosco inhaled sharply. He knew this dream was not simply a warning, it was a confrontation. The wind stilled, the realm held its breath, and Don Bosco understood. Tonight he had been summoned not to witness a message, but to behold a threat that had already begun its work in the waking world.
Don Bosco opened his eyes, not in his small room in Turin, but in the unsettling quiet of a landscape that seemed older than memory itself. He stood alone on a vast field, stretching endlessly in every direction, yet holding a stillness so complete it felt unnatural, as if the world had paused its breathing to watch him. The ground beneath his feet was dark, cracked, and strangely warm, like flesh instead of soil. Every few seconds it rose and fell with a slow, rhythmic motion. Don Bosco's brow tightened. The earth was breathing. The field itself was alive. Above him the sky hung low, colored in a pale, bruised twilight that was neither dawn nor dusk. There were no stars, only a dim wash of shifting shadows that moved as though stirred by something unseen. The air tasted metallic, cold, and whispering. A thin wind slid past him, carrying with it faint murmurs, voices, but not human. It was as though the field was trying to speak, yet lacked the tongue to form words. Don Bosco tried to steady his breath. He had walked through many dream visions before, but this place felt different. Not symbolic, but sentient. It was not showing him a message. It was reacting to him. A long crack opened across the ground, stretching outward like a jagged vein. A soft rumble echoed beneath, low and distant, like something shifting deep under the earth. Don Bosco instinctively stepped back. And then the wind changed. It stopped whispering. It began calling. Not in any language he recognized, but in a sound that resonated inside the chest, like the memory of a voice one had never heard yet somehow knew. The field's breath grew heavier, and shadows crawled along its surface like ink sliding over water. Don Bosco clutched his rosary. "Is this a warning or a summons?" he whispered. The field responded with a sudden tremor, gentle, deliberate. And then, through the twilight haze, a figure began to form at the far edge of his sight. At first, it was nothing but a ripple in the air, a distortion like heat rising from stone. But the ripple sharpened, condensed, and took on the outline of a person. The figure glided forward, without steps, without disturbing the breathing ground beneath it. Don Bosco did not move. He felt neither fear nor comfort, only the weight of expectation. The figure stopped several paces away. Its appearance was indistinct, wrapped in a cloak woven from pale shadows. The face was obscured, blurred like a memory smudged by time. Yet the presence was unmistakably real. The air around it trembled, as though even the wind hesitated to touch it. When the figure finally spoke, the voice did not come from its hidden mouth. It came from all around, from the field, the sky, the wind, carrying the gravity of ages. "You walk again, into the place where warnings breathe," the voice said. Don Bosco felt a strange calm settle over him. "Who are you?" The guide replied, "A guide, as I have been before, as I will be again." He tried to search its face, but the shadow shifted too fluidly to reveal anything. "What is this place?" The guide answered, "The threshold, a field where heaven and danger meet. Here the unseen takes form. Here symbols become flesh, and here the warnings sent to you find their first breath." The ground shuddered beneath them, as though confirming the words. Don Bosco steadied himself. "And why am I here tonight?" he asked. The guide lifted one faint, indistinct arm. The sky above them darkened, condensing into a heavy mass of swirling shapes. The field's breathing grew louder, deeper, strained. "Because the serpent has grown." At this, Don Bosco felt the temperature of the air drop sharply. "What serpent?" he asked quietly. The guide's voice softened, though the weight of its tone deepened. "The old one, the deceiver who waits not beyond the world, but beneath it. The one whose whispers twist the young. The one that coils through temptations disguised as desires, freedoms, and truths. It stirs again, and stronger than before." The earth cracked open a few meters away, exhaling a plume of cold, trembling air. Don Bosco's pulse quickened. The guide continued, "The serpent does not strike suddenly. It corrodes slowly, sweetly, invisibly. It coils around a generation long before it is seen." Don Bosco clenched his hands. "Then show me what I must fight." "You will see," the guide said. "But understand this. What rises tonight is not merely for you. It is for those under your care, for the boys who sleep while you dream, for the souls that tremble even when they do not know why." A long silence followed. Then the guide extended its shadowed hand. "Walk with me. The warnings await." Don Bosco hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. As he placed his foot onto the breathing soil, the field opened a narrow path illuminated by a faint, eerie glow stretching towards a darkness that pulsed with life. The warnings were ready, and the serpent was waking. The field grew unnaturally still, as though every grain of breathing soil paused to listen. Don Bosco sensed it before he saw it, the way the air tightened, the way the twilight sky throbbed with a silent warning. Something vast was shifting beneath the surface. The guide lifted a shadowed hand. "This," it whispered, "is the first sign." Far ahead, at the horizon where the trembling earth blurred into the dim sky, a long stretch of ground began to ripple. It moved in a slow, sweeping wave, too rhythmic, too deliberate to be wind or tremor. The soil rose and fell like fabric being pushed from beneath. Cracks spread outwards, glowing faintly with a sickly golden hue. Don Bosco felt the hair at the back of his neck lift. The ripple grew thicker, taller. The earth bulged, lifting into a mound. Then the mound moved, slid, coiled. Something enormous was rising. The breathing field gasped, literally, and a deep vibration shook the ground. Don Bosco stepped back instinctively, though he knew there was no safe distance in a dream like this. The guide remained unmoving, as though rooted to some unseen foundation. The bulging mound stretched longer, wider. Then, with a slow, tearing sound, the earth split open. A massive form pushed upward, pulling itself from the deep as though dragging half the underworld with it. A head emerged first. It was reptilian, yet impossibly wrong, shaped by laws older than biology.
Its scales were dark and metallic, reflecting no light, but pulsing faintly with an inner poisonous glow. Its eyes, ancient, lidless, and vast, burned with a cold intelligence that did not belong to any creature born of nature. The serpent. But not a serpent found in forests or myths. This one was colossal, its body thick as a tower, stretching into the broken earth longer than Don Bosco could see. Its presence warped the very air around it. Don Bosco could feel its malice, not the wild instinct of a beast, but the cunning intent of a mind that deceives. "This is no animal," he murmured. "No," the guide replied. "It is older than your languages for evil, and it feeds not on flesh, but on souls." The serpent's massive body slid free from the earth with slow, dreadful majesty. Its scales scraped the ground with a metallic resonance, each movement radiating an oppressive aura that made the sky dim even further. It lifted its head, towering high above the field, and then it looked directly at Don Bosco. The gaze hit him like a wave of cold fire. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rage, it was recognition. It knew him. Don Bosco staggered, breath caught in his chest. The serpent's eyes held the depth that seemed endless, depths filled with lies, with temptations, with the sighs of the fallen and the laughter of the deceived. When it opened its mouth, light poured out, not bright, but sickly, flickering like dying embers. No sound came at first, only the vibration of something powerful gathering. Then the voice struck. It wasn't a hiss, it wasn't a roar, it was a whisper. A whisper made of countless voices layered together, sweet, poisonous, irresistible. "Let them sleep, let them drift, let them forget." Don Bosco felt the weight of the words threaten to pull his thoughts apart. He pressed the crucifix in his hand until the metal bit into his skin. The guide spoke sharply. "Guard your mind. Its strength is not in teeth, but in whispers." The serpent continued, its whispers swirling like a storm around him. "Truth is heavy. Freedom is sweet. Why resist what feels good? Why sacrifice? Why obey?" Each phrase slithered in, coated in honey, carrying a hidden hook of despair. Don Bosco clenched his jaw. "This is temptation," he said. "It is more than temptation," the guide answered. "It is the shape that temptation takes when a generation forgets that danger wears a smile." The serpent's massive coils shifted again, and each movement seemed to echo with centuries of corruption. Wars born from pride, families broken by deceit, youths ruined by false promises. Don Bosco felt the dream itself pulse with meaning. "This serpent," he whispered, "is a symbol. Yes, a symbol of the old deception made new. It is the spirit of confusion that enters through pleasure. It is the voice that twists truth into mockery and turns clarity into fog." The serpent lowered its head, bringing its enormous eyes down to his level. Don Bosco stood firm, though his legs trembled from the weight of its presence. "It is," the guide continued, "the embodiment of the lies that are swallowed easily, the distortions that reshape a society unnoticed, the Kam Yoduha that promises freedom while forging chains." The serpent opened its mouth again. This time the whisper was darker. "Everything can be yours, if only you stop resisting." The world around Don Bosco dimmed, the sky turning into a swirl of gray and black. The ground shuddered, as if the field itself feared the whisper. The guide stepped closer to him. "Do you understand now?" it asked. "I forced a breath. Yes, it represents the evil that seduces before it destroys. It represents," the guide added, "the age that is coming, a time of noise and distraction, where the serpent need not hide in darkness, because darkness will be welcomed as entertainment, a time when the lie appears brighter than truth." The serpent lifted its massive body higher, as if preparing to strike, not with teeth, but with voice. Don Bosco held his ground. The faint light of the dream cast a fragile glow around him. "This," the guide said, "is why you were brought. You must see what hunts them." Don Bosco tightened the grip on the rosary. "And I must learn how to fight it." The serpent's eyes glowed brighter, cold, cunning, patient. The next warning was coming, and Don Bosco knew the dream had only just begun.